Good evening. I'm Rachel Floor, Executive Director of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation. On behalf of all of my library and foundation colleagues, I'm delighted to welcome all of you who are watching tonight's program online. To open, I humbly start with a land acknowledgement to recognize the Indigenous tribes of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts people of the Wampanoag Tribal Confederation territories, who both past and present and throughout many generations have stewarded the land where the Kennedy Library is today. While a land acknowledgement is not enough, it's an important way to promote Indigenous visibility, and it serves as a reminder that we are on stolen and settled Indigenous land. I invite all of us to contemplate how to better support Indigenous communities and to learn how to honor and take care of the land that each of us inhabits. I would also like to acknowledge the generous support of our underwriters of the Kennedy Library Forums, lead sponsors Bank of America, the Lowell Institute, and AT&T, and our media sponsors, the Boston Globe and WBUR. The Kennedy Library's education and public programs related to civil rights and social justice are sponsored in part by AT&T. We look forward to a robust question and answer period this evening. You'll see full instructions on screen for submitting your questions via email or comments on our YouTube page during the program. While John F. Kennedy is remembered for a wide range of presidential accomplishments, from establishing the Peace Corps to preventing nuclear war and setting us on a path to the moon, it's less known that his first act as president was to address issues of food insecurity. President Kennedy had been deeply affected by the poverty he'd witnessed while campaigning across the country, particularly during the time he'd spent in West Virginia in the presidential primary. On September 21st, 1961, just one day after his inauguration, President Kennedy signed his first executive order, which called for the Secretary of Agriculture to take immediate steps to expand and improve the program of food distribution throughout the United States, to provide, as it said, all needy families a greater variety and quantity of food out of our agricultural abundance. The issues of food insecurity continue to plague our country and deepen other problems of inequality. We are so grateful to have this timely opportunity to explore the hunger crisis with our distinguished guests this evening. I'm delighted to extend a warm virtual welcome to the library to José Andrés, named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in both 2012 and 2018, and awarded Outstanding Chef and Humanitarian of the Year by the James Beard Foundation. He is an internationally recognized culinary innovator, New York Times bestselling author, educator, television personality, humanitarian, and award-winning chef and owner of Think Food Group. In 2010, he formed World Central Kitchen, a nonprofit that provides smart solutions to end hunger and poverty by using the power of food to empower communities and strengthen economies. I am also so pleased to extend a warm virtual welcome back to the library to David Beasley. As Executive Director of the World Food Program, he continues his life's work bridging political, religious, and ethnic boundaries to champion economic development and education. At WFP, which received the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize, he draws on 4 decades of leadership and communication skills to mobilize more financial support and public awareness for the global fight against hunger. He also has a special place in Kennedy Library Foundation history. Governor Beasley received the 2003 John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award for being the first governor of South Carolina to make a public push for the removal of the Confederate battle flag from the state Capitol dome. I am also so pleased to welcome our moderator for this evening's discussion to the library virtually. Laura Reiley is a reporter for the Washington Post covering the business of food. She was previously a food critic at the Tampa Bay Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Baltimore Sun. She has authored 4 books in the Moon Handbook series and has cooked professionally and is a graduate of the California Culinary Academy. She was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for Criticism in 2017 and a James Beard finalist in 2017 and 2019. Please join me in welcoming our special guests. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Rachel. So it's such an honor to be here on this panel with you guys. I have a deep fear that it's going to be a runaway train and the two of you are going to take off in conversation. You clearly have a long relationship with each other and a lot of overlap in what you do. So if I ever give you the stink eye, it means that we got to get back to whatever I was asking, okay? So I'd like to start by saying you both are clearly early bloomers, each in your own way. Jose, you started cooking, as far as I understand, you started cooking professionally at age 15. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And David, you basically you had to transfer schools because you'd been elected to the state house in South Carolina by age 20. So you each started early on your trajectory, but you came to food from a very different direction. So I'd love to hear kind of how your starts impact how you think about feeding people. And Jose, let's start with you.
Uh-oh. Sorry, Governor. Um, so listen, long story short, we all have a relationship with food early in our lives. And for me, my mom and my dad probably, without a doubt, were the first time, like probably many of us. But my mom, my dad, they were nurses, both loved to cook. My mom was more Monday through Friday kind of cook. My father was more the weekend. My mom will be the one that will be making magic out of nothing at the end of the month before the next paycheck came, making amazing croquetas with whatever leftover piece of ham was laying around the refrigerator. And my dad would cook on weekends, especially the big paella where everybody was invited. My mom was always worried because that meant he will invite everybody in the hospital. We never knew if we were 10, 20, or 50. My father will always answer, don't worry, if more people come in, this is very simple. We add more rice to the pan. With that mentality, I grew up. My father put me making the fire. I wanted to do the cooking. My father always told me make the fire is the most important thing. When they got upset, he sent me away. They ate, obviously, without me. At the end, he put me on the side and told me, my son, I know you want to do the cooking. Everybody wants to do the cooking, but everyone forgets how to make the fire, how to control the fire. Control the fire and you'll do any cooking you want. Was a great lesson for a young cook in the making. But later on, probably I romanticized. I believe that was a metaphor for life itself. Find your fire, master your fire, and then you can do with it whatever you want in life.
David, how about you?
You know, listen to Jose reminded me a lot about my childhood growing up as well. But, you know, I was a junior at Clemson University playing ball, studying microbiology, thinking I might go to medical school or whatever. And I made the decision to run for the House of Representatives while I was a junior. But my desire to help people goes back to my mom, my dad, in the civil rights movement back in the 60s and the early 70s, when Lamar, South Carolina was one of the first forced racially integrated schools in the United States, and particularly in the South. And so, and Lamar was a typical little school where you had across the railroad track, so to speak, you had a black school and you had a white school. And my school was 98% white, black school was 98% black. And all of a sudden, boom, they were merged and the whites left the school system. And so my family stuck with the public school system. And my home, Jose, was literally, because we were, no kidding, we were a cotton field. It was either a tobacco field or a cotton field between my house and the school. And my mother was a teacher there. And so every day after practice, particularly the blacks who lived on the old farms way back, they couldn't go home and ride the bus and come back for ball practice. So they would all come down to my house and mom would cook every single afternoon before or after ball practice. So we didn't know if we were having 5 at our dinner table or 10 at our dinner table. And it was really one of the most significant and richest points of my life about the power of food, the power of breaking bread together, and at the same time learning about people that didn't grow up on your side of the railroad tracks. It was a remarkable time to really appreciate how to love and learn from one another and move forward. And so that was sort of the beginning, Laura, of I don't want to say it was my political intuition back then, because I didn't know I was going to run for anything later. It was my junior year. The first person I ever voted for was myself. And in 1978, and I only won by 3 votes. So you never know. As I tell young people, who say, well, should I do this? I'm like, look, I was 20 years old and I did it. And if I let everybody tell me what to do, oh, you're too young. No, don't do this. You'll never do anything. So go out there and get it done, and you'll be shocked at what you can do at a young age.
Wow.
So it sounds like the world owes both of your sets of parents a great debt of gratitude there.
Yeah, Laura. Yeah. But
Yeah.
David, we need more Republicans that sound like Democrats, and we need more Democrats that sound like Republicans. I mean, David is the most Democrat sounding Republican I've ever heard lately. It's amazing.
Well, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about, with all of the kind of humanitarian crisis spots that you kind of parachute into, what are the things that you do first when you hit the ground? And are there rituals or superstitions or anything that kind of orients you in a new place? Because, I've kind of followed you, not with one of those maps with the pinpoints, but kind of like that. And you certainly have each covered a lot of ground. So David, how about you? What do you do when you first get to some new crisis spot?
Wow, Laura, as you know, we go to a lot of tough spots. 80% of our operations are in conflict areas. So we hit the ground running. One of the things that I find is critical for me is to get to the hard spots. Where are the problem areas so that we can solve issues, whether it's access issues, money issues, conflict between groups, whatever the scenario may present itself. And so I like to get to the field first and foremost, see what I can see, then come back to the capital of that particular country and meet with the leadership to address the issues, try to resolve some of the problems that we may be facing. For example, like in Niger, I might be out in the field meeting and seeing the problems. You might have ISIS to the south side of us, Al Qaeda to the north side of us. We're having access issues. And so I'll come back to the capital and be very clear with the leadership. I've got to have this access. I was just there, and people are going to starve to death, or ISIS will use food as recruitment if we don't have the access we need. So we try to be very practical, but it's not always so easy because these are very dangerous places. But you got to get down on the ground and jump up and down and let the world know, hey, don't forget about the people here in Niger. Don't forget about the people here in Madagascar. Jose, nobody's better at messaging than Jose. My gosh, he's fantastic at it. And we thrive off of each other when we go out and do things with his operation out there. We were in Honduras together, I think, at World Central Kitchen, and did some things. We just did some more things. But anyway, Laura, throw it back to you.
So for me, is the rituals always are before you getting the right bag that you can carry with you, because you have no time to waste. And obviously arriving to the place in the case of a hurricane before the hurricane gets, like in New Orleans, we were responding to the earthquake in Haiti, and then the operation in Haiti was going very well. We were, I believe, reaching over 40,000 meals a day within days. But the hurricane was coming, and was important for us to be in New Orleans. We got teams that joined New Orleans. I was able to land in a plane. I think we were the last plane to land in the airport before the hurricane hit. And what we do first at World Central Kitchen is the most important. We have boots on the ground. And where are we cooking? Do we have the generators? Do we have enough food for at least the first week after the earthquake to do 40,000 meals a day? So we don't have to be expecting anything else coming outside. But also we look into what companies are out there full of food, so we can be connecting with them in the aftermath of the hurricane. So we know that we are going to be fully supported by the local private sector, their local companies. And once we see we have all of that, yes, we wait for the hurricane, we pray, so the hurricane will not do any damage in terms of, I do pray personally, in terms that will not take any lives, and that the damage somehow will be the most minimal possible. But already we know that unfortunately, people are going to need for us to be next to them. But we know that we can start cooking, and more important, we can start delivering to people one community at a time, one church at a time, one place at a time.
So, Jose,
Laura, let me add, I just now thought about this. There's a new ritual that takes place every place we land now in the last year and a half. Every place we land, you have to do a COVID test. I mean, every place you land. Jose, how many COVID tests have you done in the last year? I think I've done like 90 so far. I mean, it's just like, oh my God.
I think David has been probably the person in this pandemic that has troubled the world the most. I think the men and women that was and many of his team members, obviously, they've been responding to emergencies within the emergency. But yeah, the COVID test, I don't know if 90, but probably close to 90. I need to go through the counting because at times, because we need to be ready always to trouble the members, for example, of Wall Central Kitchen, the ones that they are always moving. Every 3 days, we will do a test. To protect ourselves, the teams, the people we are serving, but also to be ready to travel without knowing that you have to wait next day for the hospital or the laboratory to run the test. So for us, it's been very important, like David said, to be ready on the go and not having to wait for that test. So yeah, our noses are really like, oh my God, it's like, and please never take a selfie. Never take a video as they are doing the test, like happened to me in San Pedro de Sula in Honduras, because the poor nurse that was doing it, she was being very nice, and I was talking through the test, but she was waiting, she was polite and was waiting for me to turn off the camera. So like a minute later, she was still in my nose, up and down, until I told her, what's going on? So long story short, the COVID test, I agree with you. It's been the ritual in this last year and a half. But it's great because we knew that we could keep taking care of people, protecting the people that are in the teams and protecting the people that we were trying to be next to in emergencies.
So David, how many places have you been since the beginning? I mean, do you have a list? Or do you, off the top of your head, how many places have you been since the beginning of COVID?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Since COVID, probably 60, 70 countries, I would imagine. Now, some of those would be multiple times. I mean, I've been to Ethiopia probably 8 to 10 times. Obviously the United States on Fundy. So so many countries you'll go back to back because you have to. I don't know. It's been a lot. But when COVID hit early last year, and we saw it coming, it was in northern Italy, and I was down in Rome finishing up a board meeting. And I realized we need to make a move. And so I went to the Middle East and visited 4 or 5 countries there. And then it started spreading. I went to the United States, and then it was really going global and everything was starting to shut down. And so I got COVID. I think, probably the first like international figure that had COVID. And so everybody, you remember Christian Amanpour, seeing it, everybody was like, tell us about it, and I had not a really mild case, but not a really bad case. But the good news was I was over it. And then, everybody was in lockdown. So I was going to meet with all the leaders in Washington, D.C. when no one was visiting or traveling. And so I was able to meet with a lot of senators and key members of the administration to make the case. And so I took advantage of the fact that I already had it. And I began traveling all over the world when no one else was traveling. And also, when the airline industry shut down, and we can talk about this later, but when the airline industry shut down around the world, our planes were still operating because we were delivering food, medicines, ventilators, the COVID equipment, and things like that. So I was traveling more, as much, if not more, during COVID than I was beforehand, interesting enough.
So I'm interested in knowing, David, which of all of these trips, which has been the most logistically difficult, not necessarily the most dangerous, but in terms of actually feeding, what's presented the biggest challenges?
Wow, that could be multiple. Obviously, traveling inside Yemen can be difficult, but like you say, that can be more dangerous than more logistical hurdles. But going to some of these remote places, let's say, for example, I was just in Madagascar. So flying into the capital city is in itself, there are not many flights. But then getting down to the south where there's no roads, hardly at all, it'd be probably a 14, 16 hour, vehicle ride. And so how do you get a plane to get all the way down there with hardly any landing strips? reaching people that are hard to reach, or in South Sudan where you have massive flooding, to get to the places where if it were easy to reach, they wouldn't, many of these places wouldn't have food security problems. Same thing in Haiti. In some of the most difficult places in Haiti, 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, I was in Haiti because of the earthquake. And there are many areas in places like Haiti that are just not easy to reach. If you don't have a helicopter or something like that, you're not going to get to these people within a short time period. And our travel schedule is so rapid, as you know. How many places can we be per day, per week, per month to bring attention to the world, to the atrocities and the suffering of the people? So Yemen was tough. Ethiopia is quite difficult, as you can imagine right now. Madagascar, as I mentioned, South Sudan, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, where you have ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, extremist groups moving safely. A lot of difficult places. And you may have a place that's not that insecure in terms of security, but the roads, oh my goodness. I mean, it might take you 6 hours to go, 30 miles because the roads are just non-existent or just so dilapidated. One of the things that we do actually build a lot of roads. We can talk about that. We actually built about 59,000 kilometers of roads in the last few years so we can move food supplies because it saves money. Anyway, that's another discussion.
So Jose, how was it to feed people, for instance, on the cruise ships with all the infected people? I mean, were there unique challenges in doing something like that?
Yep. So
he's gone.
we began. Me personally, I began feeding, following what was going on in Wuhan on 2019, December 31st. As some people of you may know, I'm fascinated by how to feed people under strange circumstances. And it's great to go back in the past to learn about what happened. And for me, start reading what happened in 1918, how people were trying to feed in the middle of the badly called Spanish flu. But good thing is that we began gaining some experience feeding in Haiti in situations where cholera outbreaks happen, in places like maybe Mozambique, et cetera, and this learningship about how to protect our teams, and more important, the people also we were feeding, making sure that in the places we were feeding, cholera will not be an issue. I think this was a great learning experience for us. So very early on, we began thinking, if this is the big pandemic, the one that everybody's been talking about, the one that could wipe out humanity, thinking like a terrible movie, out of the face of Earth, what we will do to maintain certain level of feeding for the different people like hospitals and others that will need to be fed as we are fighting this. So we created very quickly what was this COVID-19 protocol. This was very simple, but we gathered all the information we could to make sure that we will have a very comprehensive system to have everybody healthy in the process of a virus. Nobody really was telling us everything we needed to know about it because nobody really knew the whole picture. So for me to be in my early years in the Spanish Navy gave me a little sense and glimpse of what may be happening in those cruise ships. I didn't join the team in Japan, but we activated there very quickly with help from local chefs like Nobu Matsuhisha. And it's amazing how we will create this system where we will never be in contact with anybody in the boat, but we will be delivering breakfast, lunch, and dinner for all the thousands of people inside the boat. From there, we moved to the same one, arriving to Oakland in California after we got a phone call from the governor's office. And by the time the cruise ship arrived there, we were already situated on the port, being able to feed from the first moment. In that moment, we knew that this was going to be huge. We began kind of thinking, what are we going to be doing if this is what we all imagine? As soon as I was closing my restaurants on March 14th, is when I began announcing that my restaurants, now I'm talking José Andrés, the private sector, I was going to transform my restaurants from restaurants to community kitchens, which very much I was running, but obviously World Central Kitchen teams already will be helping us and with the distribution, and we kind of became one. This became the blueprint of if restaurants are going to be shutting down, because it's the right thing to do. But we will study in the years to come if all the things that were happening were the right things to do. We did too much at the beginning and too little at the end. We were supposed to be more in between. We will need to study that, right? But for us, it was very important to send a very clear message that if restaurants were shutting in America and around the world, who better than restaurants to activate the local food relief? So we did that. We had more than 3,000 restaurants in America alone. We were able to activate restaurants in other cities all across, like Spain, like in India, like what we did in Honduras, in Guatemala, in Dominican Republic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this became a very good model. In America became what we hope one day is going to pass, the FIT Act. We were able to bring Republicans and Democrats together, like Tim Scott and Kamala Harris, both senators, and also on the other side, we got Thompson and McGovern and Davis and Hurd. Unbelievable, building longer tables, Republicans and Democrats supporting the very simple idea that in emergencies, we should have a simple activation that through Homeland Security, FEMA, we can be empowering the restaurants in partnership with the local mayors and leaders to take care locally of the issues we were facing. Who we were feeding? Hospitals. Why? Because hospitals now, I realize, the architects that build hospitals, I don't believe they build hospitals thinking on a pandemic. This is probably been to me, and I'm no expert, but I grew up in a hospital because my mom and my dad were nurses, as I told you, and they will bring me to the hospital almost every day because we didn't have any nanny, and the hospital was the place we will be exchanged between father and mother. I realized that hospitals were not thought for a true pandemic, and many of the issues we were facing was restaurants or feeding facilities badly located, or workers were not going, or companies that were shutting down without previous call. And we saw ourselves in the situation of feeding maybe the Central Park Field Hospital, or maybe the Javits Center with a big kitchen that we did outside. The same all across America. When we were in India, we took care of 93 hospitals in 17 cities. Why? Because again, the hospitals were in the most need of food support, not only sometimes for the patients, but for the people working 24/7. So this is some of the things we did. And obviously, like David was saying, we had to be responding to emergencies within the emergency: fires, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, you name it. And I think this early thing I showed you about the health protocol is what allowed the men and women of World Central Kitchen to be in so many places, keeping the teams healthy and maintaining, especially the elderly, that in the early days, we were very concerned that we were making sure that the real protocols we were having in place will not create damage in the places we were trying to feed. Keeping all this in mind is what it helped us go through this. We've done, I don't know, 60. We don't reach the amount of meals David World Food Program, amazing organization, do, but ours is very, very unique because we are finger pointing the places sometimes door by door, and for us, keeping everybody safe was the most important thing to achieve this through this entire pandemic.
So I know that at this point, World Food Program has about 20,000 employees, and World Central Kitchen has somewhere between 60 and 70 full-time, and then, you know, a reservoir of 45,000 volunteers in all of these different locations. So I guess I wonder, from your perspective, in what ways are your sizes a benefit and a detriment? What can you do, and what trips you up by being fairly large or not so large? And David, why don't you start with?
Yeah, you know, when you're feeding 120, 30 million people on any given day, week, or month, you got to have a pretty sizable operation. And like Jose, we also leverage our personnel on the ground. Sometimes I find that I got too many people at headquarters, and I like to have more of those people from headquarters out in the field. And so Jose knows exactly how we leverage, because normally we're not the last mile. We partner with operations like Jose, as well as World Vision, Samaritan's Purse, Red Crescent, Red Cross, and I could go on, hundreds of other organizations, literally dozens of thousands of people that we work with out in the field. And so when I arrived at the World Food Program, my goal was to put the World Food Program out of business so we would no longer be needed. But that obviously has not happened because of climate change, conflict, COVID, and corruption. Is going backwards, in fact, now. And so we need as many people as we possibly can. But when you think about the fact that when you're feeding 130 million people, give or take, it requires one heck of an operation. But we're very efficient and strategic. And Jose, I know would jump all over this. Is the same thing. You know, I see a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of government programs and sometimes the UN, but at the World Food Program, our people know if they save 25 cents, that's a meal for a child. And so when they save $1, they know that's 4 meals. And it's our team is always out there trying to save money so that we can reach as many children. Because when you think about COVID, there were, when I arrived at WFP, there were 80 million people 4.5 years ago marching towards starvation. 80 million. That number jumped to 135 right before COVID. And you would ask, why did it go from 80 to 135? Well, the primary reason was man-made conflict. The second reason was climate change. The third is, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when COVID hit, it doubled the number of people marching towards starvation. And we can get into the weeds of this later, but it went from 135 to 270 million people that literally are marching towards starvation. Out of that, 41 million people are knocking on famine's door. So when you think about now, the task is so ginormous. It's sad. I'd like to be taking our employment down, but quite frankly, we've got to be, when we have been, our numbers have been going up in terms of the people we're hiring because we're having to deliver so much food. It's not like you can deliver food, on a cell phone. I mean, we use this technology in many, many ways, but at the end of the day, when everybody else was running for the hills because of COVID, we're delivering food to 120, 30 million people. That requires a lot of people. Think about the math that it takes to deliver that much food, that many people. And we're always looking to be the most efficient and strategic as we can in every country that we are in.
Jose, how does your scale help and hinder?
Well, obviously, I see that World Central Kitchen is like a startup. Nate Mook, who is the leader, the CEO of World Central Kitchen, a very good friend, my very good friend, is like a brother. He's been guiding the organization in a very good direction. But I need to understand that we are still a very young organization with only 11 years of experience with what I call the boots on the ground. And what I realize is that some of the very big problems have actually very simple solutions. That the problems that we're going to be solving in the world, we need to make sure that we solve them with real people, with real decision making. Not in the offices, even that's necessary to a certain point, but with boots on the ground. When David goes to Congress or goes to big governments around the world and knocks on the door, this is obviously the role that a person like David has to be taking to make sure that countries support with funds to make sure that that happens. But myself, my role, I see myself almost like being more on the ground, because it's the only way I can be talking with people like David or others of why actually we need it with the real actions we are taking. To give you an example, I do believe that having a smaller team, but obviously, is, as David said, it depends the amount of meals that you're trying to reach. I think World Central Kitchen is going to have to be growing. I don't want it to grow because we have nothing else to do. We're growing because before we will show up somewhere and we were like the extra, the guys that came from they don't know where. And then we began taking more and more role, bigger responsibility. And now if we don't show up somewhere, people are like, where are you? So obviously we need to grow, but I only want to grow with a small size that we can be in multiple missions at once, like we are right now, making sure that the team is not big, but right size, which I think is the same conversation we are talking about government. Some people talk about bigger government. Other people talk about a smaller government. Nobody talks about what's the right size government. And no one solution is for every time. We need to be adapted to the circumstances of the times we're living. So for World Central Kitchen, we'll keep growing. Right now, we've been, listen, this month alone, we responded very quickly to Haiti. Obviously, we have a big footprint in Haiti, like World Food Program did. We were able to deliver, as David said, food by helicopter to many places. Even that's not sustainable. It's good in the beginning. It's good for scouting. But what we did after, we began hiring the local women that they use their homes double down as restaurant. We began making sure that they will have everything they need to keep their business running. We began distributing kind of cards to the families that needed the meals. Therefore, we put the local economy up and running. We kept those women working and hiring. We kept those families that needed food fed. And in the process, we didn't only fed people that needed to be fed. We put the entire local economy, one village at a time, up and running in the middle of an earthquake. If we do it this way, we can keep teams that they are the right size by coming in and maximizing the local potential of food preparation and food distribution. This way, we don't need to have a big organization with big overhead where the money goes in payroll that you never know where it goes. But actually the money goes in its biggest percentage to feed people and empower the local economies.
So it seems like, I mean, I read We Fed an Island, and I won't say that you've had an antagonistic relationship with organizations like FEMA, but you certainly historically have frequently asked for forgiveness, not permission. You know, you kind of you land, you do what you're going to do, and then you kind of, you know, work out some of the details with some of the infrastructure that historically has done this. As you grow, is that harder to do? Are you going to have to change that mindset in any way?
Well, it's two parts. One is World Central Kitchen and diplomacy, and we'll always win the day. The men and women of FEMA and every agency in America and around the world, I sincerely believe they're good people with good heart, with good empathy, that they're going to do the best for the betterment of the lives of every human being. But sometimes when things don't work, we cannot keep silent. I didn't want to take that antagonistic role in the open, but the situation in Puerto Rico was a bad situation. It was not about finger pointing and blaming, but the truth is that beyond what happened in the time of President Trump or any other president, many people recognize that when you had one season with multiple events, multiple hurricanes, doesn't matter how big your resources are. It's one moment that people get tired, that the system starts breaking down, and you need to be thinking in new big ways. What I became was a speaker of saying, guys, we can do better. We must do better. The American people should not be expecting anything less from the American government. So I was being what I was told when I became an American citizen, that every citizen should be contributing, not the day they vote, but every single day to make America better. It's been my role with plenty of friends we have, not only in FEMA, but in many other organizations, to be saying, I don't want to sound like a smart AS, smart hat, but I want to be with truth telling you we should be putting people out of the very big convention centers when they're all meeting about what to do, and more in the ground next to the people that are expecting the government be there for the people. So if anything, I'm not asking them for anything. The teams of World Central Kitchen and I personally do. In Louisiana, we were reaching within 12 hours of the hurricane leaving in the morning. We were going to places like Little Caillou and Lafitte within hours. If a little organization like us can do that, so everybody else. At the end of the day, I see myself as part of the government, even we are not part of the government, to take care of fellow Americans or to take care of fellow citizens of the world should not be used a role for the government, or a job for the big organizations like World Food Program, but should be the job of everyone. If we all come together, then we can be making sure that we don't come with antagonistic points of views, but we all work into the most effective, less red tape to be next to the people. Food and water is the perfect example. If food and water is not delivered to people quick and fast with dignity, we are failing. If we are failing, we are not here to do what the people of the world are putting their faith on us to do. So I know I love when I speak with David because he's talking more and more about that too. And I do believe we need more of that. Quite frankly, we need to clap less and do more. We need to stop giving big speeches in big conferences like we are, being given a sardine in the zoo, like if we were a seal, and start being next to the people and listening to the people that need our help. We don't listen to the hungry of the world. We don't listen to the voiceless of the world. We need to start giving them room in the table where those conversations are happening. Then and only then we can start fixing real problems in real time.
So David, I'd like to kind of jump from there to the idea, I think a ding that's always been levied against feeding organizations is that there's a lot of siloing. So when you're talking about local governments and NGOs and all of the different stakeholders in all of this, there's a lot of redundancy and infrastructure and that kind of thing. So is siloing a problem, and is some kind of more holistic approach to this also potentially dangerous in some way?
The systems that were designed over the past 50, 60 years have really had some extremely good impact, no doubt about that. When you look at the hunger rate compared to what it was 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, even though we're going backwards right now, but that's a different discussion. One of the things when I arrived at the United Nations, a little bit kicking and screaming. The bureaucracy, I was just mortified about. I didn't want to even join the UN because I thought it was going to be so much bureaucracy, and everyone kept telling me, "Oh, the World Food Program is different. It's different. It's different," and it is different. But at the same time, you got the U.S. bureaucracy, you've got German bureaucracy, EU bureaucracy, the major donors, and there was a couple things that I was surprised when I arrived. Number one, I didn't even know what people were talking about half the time. They use all these UN acronyms, and the average person, including the average senator or congressman, doesn't know what you're saying. And so I started speaking regular talk, so that people understand. Because at the end of the conversation, you get your damn rate, SAM rate, and all this. I'm like, look, are people hungry or not? Are people starving? Are they dying or what? Because we're not talking about buying better furniture for a house. We're talking about keeping people alive and giving them some hope. So it's a serious stuff at consequence here. And the other thing was, I thought, you get this development silo and you get this humanitarian silo. Well, that worked pretty good 50, 40 years ago, but the world's changed. We have now protracted conflicts that are not just a short-term natural disaster or a simple war, as you would see in the traditional sense. In climate change, everything's different now. So we need more fluid and flexibility with regards to funding. And I've asked this to leaders in countries. I said, if you want me to do with this dollar ABC, but I can also do DEF at no expense to ABC. In other words, make the dollar more strategic, more effective. Would you be opposed to that? Of course, you ask a senator or a congressman or a president of any country, they would say, well, no. But bureaucracy thinks differently sometimes. And so I will go speak to the Bundestag, speak to the UK Parliament, speak to the US Senate and House, giving, hopefully empowering the USAIDs and the other bureaucracies of foreign aid more flexibility, empower them more to be able to do more and not have their hands tied so much. And that's where what Jose was saying earlier, you can sit in Washington or in Berlin or in New York all day long, but until you get out there in the field and see how it really happens, which back to your earlier question, there are times when I tell my people, look, I know this is a problem, but people are going to die if we don't do this. Go do it. I'll get forgiveness later, not serious breaking of law or anything like that, but really trying to save lives, because again, we're not talking about somebody having a better dress or a better suit to go to a ball. We're talking about people, children living and dying and surviving. And when I don't have enough food and I don't have enough money, we have to choose who lives, who dies, who eats, who doesn't. And we've got to do everything we possibly can with maximum flexibility with the dollars that we get. And sometimes they come very prescriptive, too prescriptive, but I would rather have, you know, giving you flexibility is great, but if I don't have 50% of what I need, it gets Laura, you know this issue. It's a very complicated issue. I'd like to have maximum flexibility, but I want to have enough money to reach the people we need to reach. But let me stop right there.
So David, one more thing. So I hear a lot about kind of anticipatory action in the context of this kind of thing. Can you unpack that for people who don't really know this space at all? What does that mean, and how do you think about that?
Wow, I could talk about that for about 2 hours. But so let's say we've got a cyclone coming in to hit an area, or you obviously don't know when an earthquake's go hit, but a hurricane's coming in. We can pre-position food. If we can get in and pre-position food or pre-position other supplies, feeding for the cattle or the livestock, or bags to protect their homes. Because if we don't pre-position, after the cyclone comes in and we don't have access, the cost of delivering the food goes up astronomical, anywhere from 10 to 100 times. So I can give you example after example whereby we pre-positioned food, worked with the families, gave them money in advance, and it saved us literally about 10 to 1 on the dollar scale because we pre-positioned, as you can only imagine. When roads are closed and power's out, the cost of operation goes up astronomical. And we saw supply chain disruption in COVID. You can imagine if you had supply chain disruption in New York City, people couldn't get toilet paper. What do you think's happening in Chad or Niger or in the middle of a war zone like in Burkina Faso or Yemen or something like that?
So I actually would like to talk a little bit about money. I know it's not, my mother didn't raise me to talk about that, but both of you have seemed incredibly successful at raising enormous amounts of money since in the past few years. I think that just in terms of American contributions to World Food Program, it went from 1.9 billion to 3.65 on your watch. And Jose, obviously, your donations have risen dramatically, and the Jeff Bezos, $100 million. You both have been very effective at getting people to donate. What's your secret, and what's the message that really drives it home to people that this is such a pressing issue? And maybe Jose, start with you.
Well, listen, obviously from the days that we barely had $1 million a year budget to these days that we've done, almost hundreds of millions at this point. We've grown obviously steadily for one very simple reason. People love to see in real time what their contributions are. Empathy in America and around the world is there, obviously in the richest countries especially. But what I see is that people want to do, or they want to do by volunteering hours, or they want to feel they're part of the solution by sending you $1 at the time. For us, obviously, you will see that I put almost my entire social media at the service, not even of my own restaurants, that, believe me, my board members complain, of which they say, why you don't use it to fill up our restaurants? And if you take a look at my social media in the last many years, it's been heavily on the side of telling the story of World Central Kitchen. By people seeing in real time what we do, they have a sense that their contributions in our organization, they really see it with their eyes, where it goes. Actually, it's not even anymore me. If you take a look, many of the people on the field of World Central Kitchen with their own phones, you will see they do this kind of 360 rotation, showing where they are and telling people what are they doing and who are they feeding and what challenges we are overcoming to achieve that. All of that makes people really be close to every one of the people we're trying to help. And this has helped us in many ways raise the funds. I say that we are not really raising money. What we are really doing is gathering the help, gathering the empathy and the good spirit of the people that they want to be next to us, but they can't, because actually we cannot bring everyone with us when many people are telling us, we want to fly to you. Like, now is not the time. So for us, the fundraising has not so much anything to do with money, even obviously money is important, but I do believe that the support we are receiving in the form of money is, again, because people is the way they feel they are next to us in real time. And since then, I see many other organizations beginning doing the same type of videos that before they didn't exist. I do believe it's important we inform, we let people know what we do with their money. And in this way, they can make us, in a way, responsible if we are not using those funds in the way they're meant. For us, we show it. We go to one place and we are spending money before we even have the money in the account. Why? Because hunger and water cannot wait. The urgency of now is yesterday. We will always be there. Even worst thing can happen is that World Central Kitchen one day goes bankrupt. Worst thing can happen is that World Food Program goes bankrupt. Actually, the world cannot afford that World Food Program or World Central Kitchen go bankrupt, because we are trying to deliver the solutions on behalf of everyone in the world. At the end of the day, we can build all the worlds we want. At the end of the day, we believe in longer tables. The biggest army in the world will be hungry mothers trying to feed their children. Will not be a world that will be able to hold an army of hungry mothers feeding their children. Therefore, let's invest money in longer tables, bringing solutions to the poorer parts of the planet, responding in emergencies, and then building resilience so we can help the local economies to sustain themselves. And where hunger, like David said, one day we can claim is something of the past. I believe we can do it, but we need to be bold and we need to be drastic. The recipes of the past, they've shown they don't work. We need to be writing new recipes for success. We cannot afford to have a world that is poor and hungry. We must do better. We have to do better.
So David, I'd like to ask you the same question, but I'd also like to say, I'd like to ask a little bit more about your narrative. So right now, what's the thorniest problem? I mean, we have, a rise in violent extremism, we have climate-related migration, we have natural disasters, we have, there are a lot of different and overlapping messages. And what have you found are the messages that resonate most or that are the most pressing in how you do your work?
Yeah, Laura, when I arrived at the World Food Program, President Trump had just been elected. There were 4 nations facing famine. The president was talking about zeroing out international aid. And so why would you take that job? I didn't even want a job. And so I had my Republican and my Democrat friends in the Senate saying, you got to do this. You're the only one that could, reverse the thinking of the administration. I said, well, let me do that, but give someone else a job. And well, anyway, 4.5 years later, here I am still. And honestly, it was amazing to see the Republican and Democrat at one end of Pennsylvania Avenue start cooperating with the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. You didn't see this in the press, but it was like the miracle on Pennsylvania Avenue. And Laura, it had all to do with messaging. I remember in the first few weeks when I came into the World Food Program, I was at one of the first, Jose, you'll laugh, you and I have talked about this before, in one of the first extensive, almost all day meeting at the UN. And after about 6 hours, Laura, I walked out and saw the Secretary General, and I said, you're gonna have to fire me. I said, I just sat through the 6 hours, the biggest pile of what I've ever seen, and I need to be raising $1 million an hour. Now I need to be raising $1.5 million an hour. I said, I don't have time for this. I said, and they're talking about stuff I don't know what they're talking about, what I was saying earlier. And so what I decided to do, and you saw it from Jose, I mean, it's about passion, it's about energy, and it's about strategic messaging. And so as I began messaging to Fox and CNN in the United States and the different media outlets in Europe, Germany, because the taxpayer in Germany and the taxpayer in Canada and the UK and the United States, It doesn't matter whether they're left side or right side. They have these same questions. Why should I send money down to Honduras or to Niger when I've got road problems, funding needs in schools, healthcare funding issues, et cetera, et cetera. And so you've got to make the case very clearly. Number one, if you're not going to do it out of the goodness of your heart to help people, then number two, you better do it out of your national security interest. Because let me show you what's going to happen if you don't. Here's what's going to happen. You will have mass starvation. You will have mass destabilization of a nation, or you will have mass migration. So starvation, destabilization, or mass migration. And it's 1,000 times more expensive to do it after the fact versus in root cause. And so we've tried to be very strategic in our messaging, because I do believe that the average from our messaging, whether it's Europe or US, the response to the taxpayers and to the congressmen or parliamentarians is the same when they hear the message very clearly laid out that they understand. And so why should they? And when I put out, for example, Laura, the Washington Post, I was down in Honduras, actually with World Central Kitchen, and I was down in Honduras and Guatemala. In the Washington Post, you had an article while I was out in one of the fields, and it was the United States was spending $60 million per week for shelters along the U.S. border at a cost of average $3,750 per person per week. I can have a resilient, sustainable program for $1 to $2 per person per week in Honduras and in Guatemala. Now, the American taxpayer would say, well, why wouldn't we do that? It even doesn't even get to the question whether we should do that, because they see it as so obvious. Why would we not do that? So this is the type of messaging that we're trying to get out around the world, because when people see that, they're like, wow, that's a good use of my tax dollar. It's helping people, it's stabilizing nations, it's stopping migration by necessity, as well as saving lives. So,
but if I can, Laura, but David, we need to go further. I mean, listen, I've been to China a few times, and I love the people of China, and I don't have anything with China. But in this geopolitical strategic talk about China, take a look how many companies we have in China, American companies, European companies. Europe is having a true problem with all the immigration of people looking for a better life. The same for the United States, people, mothers that they're trying to feed their children. We need to start just thinking how we're going to make all those countries surrounding America better and stronger. Let's bring those companies to those countries. They are the same workers, the same people that are working in America, the many immigrants that are making the American economy do well. So if they are doing well in America, why those workers are not going to do well in Central America, in South America? Why the United States of America doesn't have a policy, which will be pure national security, of start building more of those factories, creating wealth in every one of those countries? If we do this, we're going to help those democracies, hopefully, to stabilize. We're going to help the economy to stabilize. All of a sudden, nobody wants to leave their homes. So I don't want to be feeding people that are hungry for the rest of my life. Let's start having real conversations in making the countries surrounding America, surrounding Europe, and why not the countries in the world, do better. We can do better. We need to have a policy that sees that fighting hunger is 360. Right now, at times, we keep throwing money at the problem when we can be investing into true political, economical solutions. That's the way we will not have people like the 25,000 Haitians in the border, that this is not a problem that President Biden created, with all due respect. This is a problem that the United States of America has been created for more than 5, 10, 12, 14, 15 years. We need to be having a more holistic political approach to fighting hunger, because it's in the best interest of America and is in the best interest of the world.
That was wonderful, Jose. And I have heard rumors that you've thought more about kind of getting into the policy side of things. And I see a lot of that in what you just said. I would vote for you. I'm just saying that right now.
Well, Laura, let me add to that. I mean, thanks to people like David, and I've spent slowly but surely all my life more and more in policy. I began with Dan Glickman, Secretary Glickman, in 1996, when I saw the power of a bill, the Good Samaritan bill, to be able to feed people in America when a private sector donated food to NGOs. And slowly, quite frankly, a smart policy is good politics. Food is actually 87% of Americans believe that every American should have the right to food and to don't be hungry. So actually, food is the one area that is bringing all of America together. We need to make sure that good policy becomes a smart politics, where then we can empower not only America, but feed the world, where 1 + 1 becomes 3. So you're gonna see, I've been in policy now for quite some time, trying to be a voice when I feel when my voice can add support to different causes. And it's the role of everybody to make sure that our politicians don't do things because it's the right thing to do to gain a vote, but that they do things because it's the right thing to make sure that no American in blue and red states forever, they will be hungry again.
So one thing we haven't spoken, we need to get into the Q&A now, but I think one thing we haven't spoken about too much is the food system. And not that this is not a monolithic, I mean, obviously we're talking about hundreds of food systems if we're talking about all the countries of the world. But I am interested, David, in the whole idea of the UN Sustainable Development Goal. This number 2 is, net zero or zero hunger. In terms of the food system or the food systems, what are the kind of fundamental building blocks that would have to change to even make that not a fantasy?
Well, some people think that the SDG goal to end hunger by 2030 is not achievable. And actually, I think it is. But for the wars and conflicts that we're facing now, because not many people will realize this, Laura, but 200 years ago, 94% of the people on Earth were in extreme poverty. And that was when we had a population of 1.1 billion. So when you look at the past 200 years, we've actually built systems that's sharing more wealth, more shelter, et cetera, than any time period in world history, very successfully. Now, try telling that to the 10% that we have not yet reached. And I don't think we tear down the system to reach the 10 that destroys it for the 90, but we cannot in any way, shape, fashion, or form back off our commitment to reach that 10%. And that's where the systems have got to continue to be tweaked, improved, what's not working, what is working. And this is where the United Nations, I think, is really driving the message home right now in a very, very, very good way. One of the things that I think the UN made a mistake decades ago is it began shunning the private sector as opposed to integrating the private sector strategically, because as Jose was literally talking about just a little while ago, you're not going to solve the hunger problem by charity by itself. It's just not going to happen. It's going to take private sector engagement as well as United Nations and governments and NGOs, smallholder farmers, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got solutions we can actually achieve. And I wish we had time to get into all that today, but there's so much success taking place out there. But when you look at why we've gone backwards in the last 3 or 4 years, it's conflict, man-made conflict. And I say man-made, I mean that in a gender way too. It's man-made conflict. And so when you look at the simple fact there's $400 trillion worth of wealth on Earth today, and the billionaires' average daily net worth increase last year, net worth increase per day was 5.2 billion. And all I need is 6 billion to reach the 41 million knocking on famine's door. And I'm thinking, this is disgraceful. This is shameful. So we've got food systems need to be tweaked. We need to inspire and empower the wealthy to do more. They've got to do that. Governments to some degree are tapped out. We don't have time to get into all the policy issues here, but Laura, when you think about how much wealth there is on Earth today, and the simple fact that 24,000 people are dying per day from hunger, 9 million per year from hunger, that is a disgrace on humanity, absolute disgrace. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. This has everything to do with humanity. And I think you see why I love Jose. He gets passionate about it because fighting out there these issues, it's just heartbreaking to see people dying today.
It's amazing to listen to you, Governor, because man, you sound right now that you are running on the liberal democratic wing, and actually, this is a good thing. Everybody should be almost fighting for the opposite in a way to bring everybody together to the middle. But I agree with you. One thing I'm disappointed with the UN. In the 17th goals, if you use the top description of everyone, no poverty, zero hunger, the word food doesn't show up anywhere. And this, quite frankly, shows me that I don't understand. I don't know if we understand the problem. Should not be zero hunger, should be food for all. And zero hunger, to me, sends the message that let's take care of the problem just by throwing some breadcrumbs to the poor. Food for all sends a message of let's do a smart investment. So people don't want our pity. I know, I'm there next to them. People want our respect. How do we give them respect? By just giving them every other week some food so they can survive and they don't look like their children are in a bed in the floor dying of starvation? Or investing smartly with programs that I know a food program has some, and then other organizations, but I don't see enough of them. So the 17 goals, I'm somehow disappointed. I was very young when UN and UNICEF and others announced we're gonna end childhood hunger by the year 20,000, and nothing happens. I do believe that in the same way in the private sector, when we promise our investors and our board that we are gonna hit certain earnings or certain achievements, and if we don't do it, we are fired. I do believe that in the nonprofit sector, in the development agencies, UN and others, we need to start claiming successes that we want to achieve. And if the people that are in charge don't achieve them, they should move out and let the space to people that are willing to commit. I do believe in NGO world, in the government, we need to start treating those slightly more as we do with the private sector. If you claim something and you don't deliver, means you are not able to be on that role and you should be moving on. We all, me first, we need to be standing more by the numbers we promise and making sure that if we don't achieve them, something happens. But I am tired of a UN that loses credibility every 10 years, but not really achieving on behalf of the voiceless and on behalf of the people don't know, people like David is there and others, that when we don't deliver on behalf of humanity to solve the hunger problems and the other problems, we are letting humanity down. We, again, I said before, we have to do better and we need to make everybody responsible for their claims. I'm happy if those claims, somebody's backing them up. But if we just claim because we all feel good, we are gonna end hunger by the year 2030. I know it's not possible. I know it's not gonna happen. I know we're gonna fail. But therefore, people are already clapping like if this is a big achievement. This is the little side. I'm a little bit disappointed. And this is why I'm going to be talking on behalf of the voiceless, that they require that we don't cherish big announcements, but that we are there with them next, achieving little successes that gives a path forward of achieving those goals one day.
Laura, you see why he has 1 million Twitter followers and I only have 63,000. I mean, it's just like
I retweet you all the time. You know it.
Well, so actually, Jose, I want to come back to you on that. And I'm interested in both of your ideas on this. And this goes to one of the questions that was asked in the chat. So recently, if you look at Silicon Valley VC money, you know, where that venture capital money is going, there's an awful lot of ag tech and food tech that's there. And we've seen, you know, a lot of ink spilled in the name of plant-based meat and cell cultured meat or cultivated meat, or what's the role of science in our food system and in feeding people? And, you know, we had a period where GM crops were really villainized. And I think we're kind of with CRISPR tech and whatever, those kinds of things, we're kind of coming out the other side and embracing technology a little bit more in terms of seeds and crops. I'd love to hear from each of you what the role of science should or could be in, you know, especially as we're looking at that 10 billion by 2050. Jose, what do you think about kind of the role of science?
Well, I know it's been this conversation if science is evil, science is hell, or science is good. Science has been always great for humanity. We are in a better place today thanks to humanity being able to master and control science. What we need to make sure is that that science is at the disposal of all. At the end of the goodness of the earth is how we're going to be feeding the world. And we need to make sure that while I love private sector. Even David today sounds more like in the other spectrum. It's kind of funny. I want the private sector to succeed, but we have to make sure that the private sector doesn't succeed. The big private sector, the big companies, they don't succeed at the expense of the little ones. We saw what happened in Beirut. I was there 1-2 days after the explosion. 90% of the reserves of grain they were in one place in the port were exploded. Almost Beirut, Lebanon went through a famine because somebody was so nutty to put all the seeds in one place. Okay, that example, let me take it somewhere else. If we put the responsibility of feeding the planet Earth in few companies, I am very worried that we will put in danger the same way that Lebanon was in danger of hunger because somebody took the wrong decision of putting all the seeds in one place. I'm very worried that if we don't diversify our food sources, if we put, let's say, all the eggs in one basket, that one day we may be having a problem. The big companies are the ones that have the big money to invest in the big science. We need to make sure that that science is more shared with all, and where actually we give a true opportunity to the middle and smaller food producers of the world to also be successful. Why? Because we will diversify. We will have not 5 big crops, but hundreds and hundreds of crops. If one day we have a pest, like the one we saw in Africa during this pandemic, or we have a fungi, or we have another type of thing we don't see, a drought, we need to make sure that the diversification of the food sources is so massive that we will never put in danger feeding America and feeding the world. Now, science is important in many ways. Science can help us produce water from seawater. One day, science will help us milk the clouds. One day, science will help have seeds that and crops that they don't erosion the land so much with a whole bunch of different nutrients that instead of enriching the land and enriching the ocean, makes the ocean get sicker by so many fertilizers we keep adding. Science is going to help us to do a lot of things in feeding in a better way. We need to put more investment behind it, but we need to make sure that the few companies are not the ones controlling how we feed the world. We need to make sure, starting by America, that the Farm Bill is not a farm bill that only benefits the few, but a farm bill that helps rural America. By the way, a rural America that is mainly Republican, where I will like to see more Republican senators and congressmen supporting a farm bill that helps the little farmers in their states. This is not, and I cannot few Democrats too, but we need to make sure that yes, science is there, that we support good science that will help fill the world without contaminating it, but make sure that that science doesn't belong to the few, but that that science belongs to the many. If we do that, we have a chance to feed in the world and reaching the rural communities in America and around the world. If not, we will make rural America poorer. One day we will have less company producing food, and one day we may wake up in the morning and that food that we take for granted may not be there because we made the wrong decisions on giving the responsibility to feed the world to the few. Let's make sure we share that responsibility with the many.
And Laura, let me add here, because I could speak for 2-3 hours just on this subject on science alone, but on the private sector, particularly big corporations, one of the things that I've been talking to major CEOs in the last few months, and I'm like, look, I know you have an obligation to your stockholders, but you also have an obligation to society. And I'm not just talking about a social responsibility to put philanthropy into the systems. I'm talking about going into developing nations, where smallholder farmers, I don't want you displacing smallholder farmers. How do you integrate smallholder farmers into your system? Maybe it is that you make a little bit less over the next 5 years. Maybe you're a little bit less efficient over the next 5 years. But if you integrate the smallholder farmers and change the societal norms in these developing nations, you will see prosperity beyond your farthest imagination, and it will be an extraordinary success story. So I don't want to say I'm using the bully pulpit, but a moral outrage. But what I'm trying to do is really inspire the major CEOs around the world to think a little bit differently in the countries that are developing that need help. Because in these countries that Jose was referring to, 90% of the food consumed in these countries is produced by smallholder farmers. I mean, little moms and pops, and it's 2/3 of the agricultural production. So you just can't come in and displace smallholder farmers. It's critical that we do it such a way that you don't have political destabilization or migration or many other issues, and it can be done. But we've got to think a little bit differently, think a little more strategically about the good and the needs of the community and not just the bottom line of a corporation. And I think if we take a longer view, I think everybody wins, including the corporations and the smallholder farmers. And we're going to really be pushing this over the next couple of years at the World Food Program into country by country by country, as you'll see.
So David, I know we've had a lot of the kind of American or Western ag tech that's been brought to bear in, say, Central Africa has not always been successful. It's been prescriptive in a way that hasn't always made sense. So how do you do that? How do you harness the power of science and greater productivity of soils, or seed advancements, or those kinds of things, in a way that is culturally sensitive, or that allows for vastly different kind of lifestyles and scales? How should we be thinking about that? The use of science in those kind of contexts?
Wow, Laura, that's a loaded question. I mean, I could just get into Southern Africa, where every like maize, corn was brought into Southern Africa because of the mines, and they were used for carbohydrates. That was not your normal consumed product a long time ago. And so maize is just being devastated by the heat rising of temperature, right? We know those numbers. So sorghum is a better opportunity, more nutritious, et cetera. That's science. And so how do we change habits in Southern Africa? Now I can get into Niger and Mali, CAR, all these different countries where science is critical. I also, I challenge the UN, I've challenged the United States and other major donors, is that how long have you been in this country with your programs? 20, 30, 40 years, and what do you have to show for it? Maybe it's not working. Maybe you need to step back and say, hey, what do we need to do differently? How do we take advantage of science, better seeds, better practices, as we're seeing in the developed nation, but at the same time, how and which can be integrated? One of the greatest strengths that the United States has, and it's not just the United States, but we're here in the U.S. right now, is our agricultural universities have a lot to really provide. But what the universities and corporations need to do is take a more holistic approach in countries, and don't just come in with a little piecemeal approach. Say, how do we actually solve the problems? Because many of the problems you see in countries, aside from conflict and climate extremes, you get into supply chain dynamics and better roads, better infrastructure, and the list goes on, and better practices. All these things add up. And I don't feel like, and I think this is what Jose was touching on earlier, is taking a more holistic approach in countries. And one of the things I was talking to some of my Republican Democrat friends down at the Hill about the border along United States South is I said, it's like you got leaks in the ceiling, and you got 10 or 12 leaks, and the carpet's got to be replaced, the table's got to be replaced, the curtains got to be replaced, the floor's got to be replaced, and you're fighting over where to put the buckets. I mean, it's cheaper to go up there and fix the leaks than it is to keep fighting over where to put the buckets. It's just a lot cheaper. So anyway, science is critical. I wish we could spend a lot more time on that, because we at the World Food Program, and I know Jose sees this, we integrate science in so many ways, for artificial intelligence, to you name it, in so many sophisticated ways to be more efficient, more effective. Like you see, like weather systems, how that changes the dynamic, anticipation, as you were talking about earlier, and the list goes on, and better technology to be more strategic with the food that we use, et cetera, et cetera.
So each of you have engaged with children in different contexts, and I would like to hear kind of how you disseminate messages about food and about other things beyond food via things like school meals or feeding children, and how can they be kind of tapped to move things in a better direction, kind of for all of us. Jose, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, obviously the children issues are many, and is slightly different what happens in places like Europe or United States, or what happens in places like Haiti or more third world poorer countries. But let's talk first very quickly about America. America, which is without a doubt the richest country in the world, the #1 consumer of soda in the world, is the #1 country in the world in obesity. And obesity children, I think, if I'm not wrong, we are leading to. The #2 country in soda and in obesity is America too. So in the process of feeding America children, we are already not allowing those children to grow in a healthy body by indirectly not tackling the problem at the source. One of the things we saw when in 1946, 1947, the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, they saw that the men and women joining the forces, they were not fit to serve because they were malnourished. Thanks to the military push, what the school lunch program and feeding children in the schools in America, this program began. And since then, we can see that this, to a degree, was successful. Today, almost we see the same problem, but the contrary. We are feeding them too many calories. We're not feeding them too many nutrients. Before the US government, to a degree, it's indirectly causing a situation where children are not healthier because the bad quality of calorie dense, nutrient low food we are giving them. And if you tell me what the role of the government should be, is to make sure that they achieve systems to protect their citizens and for the betterment of their lives for citizens. I think one of the great things President Biden did coming in quick and fast is all the different programs through Secretary Vilsack at the Department of Agriculture that they've been doing to make sure that children, #1, will be fed, and then to try to start doing more and more things that will allow children to eat better. How we will do that? Making sure that what we sell them is not commodities. What we feed them are not commodities, but actually food that we can understand. Yes, more vegetables, yes, more fruits, the right amount of chicken, of protein, of fish, and to be possible, done locally. So at the end, we are not spending billions, if not trillions of dollars in fixing Americans later on in life, but we are investing in having productive Americans in early on in life. And then very quickly, I told you that the issues are many and no time to address them. Let me show you one area, talking about children, especially women, especially young girls. You may be building all the schools you want, let's say in rural Haiti, but you know what that young girl does when she's 12, 13? The boys go to school because the fathers, they hope the boy will do well and they will take care of the family. The young girls are totally like a commodity in the sense of they are here used to cook and whatever else. They send those young girls to pick up wood so they can cook and feed their families, to pick up water so they can cook and clean themselves, whatever. So even if you build the schools, if you don't address the main problem of how they feed themselves, those girls will never receive proper education. One of the 17 goals that I think it's somehow submerged is that the most important thing humans do in planet Earth is eating every day. We eat and we breathe from the day we're born to the day we die. Clean cooking is a program within the UN Foundation. Clean cooking Right now, today, we have almost 3 billion people on planet Earth that cook with charcoal or wood, mainly women that die. And many of those young girls that will never receive education because they are doing the course of bringing the energy to cook the energy. This is some of the issues we are facing with children in the 17th UN goals. We need to make sure that we address those situations where it's not that we claim what the problem is, but we really show the way to invest into the solution. So in 10 years, we could claim that those young girls, actually they're moving out of poverty because they don't have to spend hours gathering wood or gathering water, and they are receiving proper education that itself can give them a chance to move them out and their families of poverty, because the education is going to allow them to get better jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some of the many different circumstances that children in America and around the world are facing every day.
Laura, let me add, because school meals is critical. We've seen the benefit of the United States and around the world. And I know, other than governments, we're the world's largest provider of school meals. We've 17 million meals school children directly, another 40 million. And what we like to do is start a program, work with the government, then transition out. But let me just give you a couple of examples. When people say, well, why should I support this program in a school meals program in Niger? And so let me just give you what reality on the ground is, because you've got ISIS and Al-Qaeda, you got extremist groups trying to exploit and recruit by using food as a weapon of recruitment, and people struggling to get food because of the Sahel and climate change. And so when we come in with a food program and help them rehabilitate their land, what we call a food for asset program, amazing success. And when we complement that with a school meals program, let me tell you what happens. Migration drops off a chart. Put a financial figure on that. Marriage rate of 12-year-old and 13-year-old girls drops off the chart. Put a financial number there. Teen pregnancy drops off the chart. Put a financial number there. Recruitment by ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab and other extremist groups drops off the chart. I've had more mothers tell me, we didn't have a way to feed our little girl for 2 weeks, Mr. Beasley. My husband had to join ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Or, thank you, because the school meals program, and if it's a homegrown school meals, Jose, you and I have talked about this. Oh my goodness. You'll take an area like in Guatemala, you've got plenty of calories, you've got the wrong calories. And so what we like to do with homegrown school meals is innovate the local community smallholder farmers with the mothers coming in and changing the habit of bad products versus more nutritious products, growing what really can be successful in that area, scaling it up and changing habits that really change the future of children that otherwise would be wasted and stunted, et cetera. So this is extremely important, not even get into the GDP dynamics of how much it means to the GDP of a nation by having little girls and little boys with proper school meals.
Wonderful. So we have just a couple minutes left, and I would like to go to a reader question that's not a small one, but the question is, what can an individual do? What's the most important thing an individual can do to make an impact on global hunger and on local hunger? And David, why don't we start with you? And we really just have about a minute for you.
Oh my gosh, Jose and I could probably jump up and down on this one for an hour. But number one, look at your local community. Don't underestimate how many people are struggling in your own village, your own community. Number two, yes, you can go online and give, and there's ways to do that, WFP.org, et cetera, et cetera. Speak out to your congressman, but be engaged and be involved. It's amazing how simple it is. I remember when I was 20, 21 years of age, people said, you can't make a difference. And I'm telling you, a young person can make a difference, whether it's hunger, poverty, whatever it might be. So just step out. Don't hesitate to put that first foot forward, and you'll find out, quite frankly, you'll be the one more blessed than the ones you're helping.
And Jose?
Obviously, be aware what the community you live in and the needs. And then the issues we face in the world. Knowledge is key. Today, the biggest form of democracy is what's on your plate. But to know why is the biggest form of democracy, you need to understand what's happening in your plate. So knowledge is key. Request White House Food Conference. We are asking President Biden to have, the last one happened 50 years ago in 1969 under President Nixon. Many great things happened. Things had changed in 50 years. We need a new White House Food Conference so we can come up with better and smarter ideas to keep feeding America and the world. And then concentrating things that are doable. We should be announcing that food deserts are ending in America in the next 4 years. If we bring the force of different departments in the White House, with the White House, private sector, NGOs, local community leaders, we can end food deserts. If we end food deserts, we give a chance, especially to working mothers, single mothers, to make it on their own. They don't want our pity, they want our respect. You see, those low-hanging fruits that we need to stop claiming, whoa, we are having a problem with food deserts, and start asking our congressmen and senators to once and for all do something about it. Many more things, but we need to go for the low-hanging fruits. And every time a politician promises you something, make sure that you hold them accountable to that promise. Building a better democracy takes all of us. And the only way we're gonna do it is not when we think like the ones don't think like us, they are our enemy. But like the ones don't think like us, better be bringing smarter ideas, and us better be ready to listen. When this happens, then longer tables, we can be fixing one problem at a time with real solutions in real time. Everything else is bad politics that nobody wants. We need a smart policy and people with boots on the ground to make it happen at home and abroad. If we do that, we have hope for the world. But all together, you who asked the question and everybody listening, we must act. Let's clapping to the speeches and more doing in real time, one day at a time.
Well, gentlemen, it's been such an honor and such a treat for me. And I know for all of the people watching, this has been illuminating and entertaining. And thank you both for being so generous with your time tonight. And may our paths cross again. And thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Jose, great to be with you, brother.
Governor, I mean, man, I love what you're doing. And you know, people like me, we're next to you and you people all together. We need to be ending hunger in the world. Let's be bold. Let's write new recipes. We can do it. Thank you, Laura. You're the best.
Thanks, Laura. Fantastic.